In this video, I'm going to walk you step by step through modeling a simple 3D object. The object I'm going to model today is going to be a credenza. If you don't know what a credenza is, it's usually what people might put a TV on or other furniture for a living room or maybe a dining room, where it's more of like a cabinet. They might have drawers, but for what we're going to model it like a cabinet where we'd have doors that open. I'm going to use this kind of as a reference. We're not going to do like this crazy material, but I like the shape of it. I like where the doors are, and we are going to do little knobs, not quite like this, more probably like rounder knobs, but we're going to also add some feet. So this should be a really good practice. So I'll make sure I keep this available. The nice thing is it does give us our height, width, and depth. So we do have a nice area to start with. So these are in inches, so we will have to translate these to centimeters. So I'm going to first do that. If you do not know, most people probably can't do this out of their head, we can do an inches to centimeters conversion. So let's do the first one. So its height is 34 inches, which is 86.36 centimeters. I'm just going to say it's 86 centimeters, and I am writing these down so I don't forget them. This is why it's always handy to have a scratch pad available to you so that you can write little notes down to yourself. So that our Y will be 86. Our width is 80 inches, which is 203 centimeters. Let's make it an even 200. That's a nicer number. And the depth is 19 inches, which is 48 centimeters. Let's do an even 50. That'll be a nicer number. So our X is going to be 200, our Y is going to be 86, and our Z is going to be 50. So let's go to Maya and let's create this. So I'm going to start with the primitive that is as closest to that final as I can find, which is going to be a cube. Next, let's go to our attribute editor and let's go and set our width, height, and depth. So that width was 200. The height was 86 and the depth was 50. And I do actually want to add a couple subdivisions. This will help me out. So if we look back at our reference, it's very easily kind of cut down the middle. Do you see that? So adding one subdivision going this way around will be beneficial to us. So I'm going to go ahead, and I believe that would be along our width, and just add one. I'm going to prepare this now for 3D modeling. So the first thing is I do want to get that pivot point at the bottom. It is currently in the middle, so let's get that set. I am going to then move this. I need to move this up. I don't have a nice area to snap to, and I don't want to just add geometry just for the sake of moving our pivot point. We should be familiar with how to adjust our pivot points. If it's 86 centimeters tall, if I move this up by 43, it should then be sitting on our grid. With my move tool, I'm then going to turn on edit pivot, and then I'm going to hold down the X key to snap it to the grid, and I can easily snap it like that, and then turn off edit pivot. Next, let's rename this credenza. And our last little bit of cleanup is to freeze its transform and delete its history. All right, we are good to start modeling. So the first thing I do want to do is I do want to get it a little bit closer. So we got our height, width, and depth. But notice that it does have these little feet on there. So, our bottom is not actually down here. So I am going to grab those bottom faces and bump them up so we have room to create feet. And since I do need to do some modeling, I am going to be kind of, working a little bit coarsely, and I do want to actually turn my step snaps on. So I currently have my move tool on because I do want to set my step snap to absolute, and 1 centimeter is probably good. I probably am not going to be modeling any deeper right now, any smaller than 1 centimeter. So this will make sure I stay on the right track. So to bump up that bottom, I do want to hit Q on the keyboard to change to my select tool. I don't want to accidentally be extruding when I don't mean to. So I'm going to just select these bottom ones by holding, click the first one, then shift click to select the next one. I can then get my move tool, and I'm just going to bump this up maybe a couple centimeters, maybe 5. Let's do 6. Let's do an even 6. They're not very tall feet. 6 is probably pretty close to that. And, our pivot still should be at the bottom like that is accurate. So why don't we work on adding those feet? We could do that first. So I am going to do this by extruding them out from the bottom. And one of the ways I can do this is by inserting some edge loops all the way around. But I do want to be very mindful of where these go. So the first one here, it is going to be like right in the middle, like that. But we have this one down here. So we don't need it to be 1. We need it to actually be split into 2. And the easiest way to do that is going to be to bevel our edge loop. So I'm going to get my edge select, change to the select tool. I'm going to double click that edge all the way around, and I'm going to use my bevel. That is obviously way too much, and I can fix this later to be a little bit closer, but let's maybe try like a 0.05. Ooh, that's even too much. 0.02. That's probably going to be a little bit closer to what I need. And notice that just beveling an edge on a flat surface just basically split it evenly for us on both sides. Let's make sure this is where we want it. Let's see. So if it is at an x -2, x +2, that means that it is 4 centimeters wide. That sounds like a pretty good size width for our feet. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. But I do want to remember that I'm making my feet 4 centimeters wide so that all the other ones I insert are going to be in the right spot. So, I can't, if I do it now, that's not the shape I want, right? I need to put in another cut. So I'm going to have to insert in another edge loop. I will also need to insert in an edge loop on this side too, because we'll need a back foot. So, I might as well do both at the same time. And I can use the connect tool to do this. So I first need to select the ring around of my edges, and I do that by pressing Q on the keyboard to switch to my select tool. I'm going to click on one of them, then double click on this one, and it will ring select all the way around for me. I can then come over here and click connect, and I don't need 1, I actually want 2 segments. You see that? And I could take some time and try to slide them, but honestly, I'm probably not going to be able to get it as accurate to where I need it to be, because I need it to be exactly 4 centimeters away from the edge. So I'm just going to hit enter to confirm that and turn off the connect tool. And instead, I'm going to find this edge. Where is that at? It is at Z25. So 25 minus 4 is going to be 21. I just selected this whole loop by, if you just double click on an edge, it will select the whole loop. And then I can come over to Z and just type 21. So since I am being very smart and building this on our origin, and it's positioned exactly in the middle of our object, if this one is at Z21, I know that this one on the opposite side is going to be at Z -21, because this edge here is the same distance from the center. So -25, -21. All right. Now that we have those two cuts, we do have these nice little squares that if we select them, again, press Q to select. So Q, click, hold Shift, click. Because then I'm just going to get my move tool by pressing W. Because if I hold Shift now and just pull down on the Y axis, I can extrude these down. I want to make sure that these are on the ground. Notice I pulled them down and they're at -2, so I went too far. So I do need to adjust these. As a reminder, I need to make sure I let go of the Shift key before I move them. Otherwise, if I try to move them up, I'm actually extruding. Do you see how we did that? I'm extruding back up into itself. So we don't want to do that, so we're going to let go of the Shift key, and I'm just going to move it back to 0. And I can do that nicely because I do have my step stamp turned on. So we have our first couple feet. Let's now do these ones. So we need to make the squares there, 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 and there. We can utilize these. So we don't need to do extra cuts. We just have to put an extra one over here and over there. So we can use the connect tool. Again, I do want to show you another tool that we could do as well. If we do need to kind of eyeball or type in an adjustment anyway, we don't necessarily want to use the connect tool if we're not trying to get it in a very specific proportional position. Instead, we could just use our insert edge loop, which is located underneath mesh tools, insert edge loop. And I can just kind of click. And while I'm here, I might as well click over here too. Then if I hit the Q key to select, I will turn off that insert edge loop. So obviously not in the right spot, but that's fine. These are pretty easy to fix. I know that this edge is at 100, so this edge needs to be at 96 to get that perfect 4 centimeter by 4 centimeter. Same thing for this one. This needs to be at -96. So we're close with that one. That was pretty close, but not quite. And we do want to be pretty accurate with these things. Now that we have those cuts in, I'm going to rotate down this way, get my face select, switch to our selection tool by clicking Q, and then I'm just going to go around and select all 4 of these. When I have them selected, I'm going to switch back to my move tool and hold Shift and just pull these down. I'm going to release everything so I don't accidentally extrude when I don't mean to, but I didn't quite get it to 0. I could just type in 0 here and it will pull those down to the correct size. And we have our feet. If we wanted to be fancy, we could just kind of scale these a little bit, or we could move them. We could just grab these edges here, those. I'm going to just move them so I know exactly where they go. So I'm just going to move them in by 1 centimeter. Same thing over here. Let's move those in by 1 centimeter. These might be more difficult. I don't probably want to move them in by 1 centimeter, because they'll get really skinny. So I might move them in by just a ½ centimeter on each side, which would be -1.5. And then 1.5. And just that tiny little bit of finesse of scooting those in makes it look just a little bit more polished, spending that little bit of time. Okay, we got our main body, we got our legs. Let's move on and do our cabinets. So we first need to make sure that we're making an area for those cabinets. And they are even on both sides, so that is beneficial to us. So we do need to put them inside of here. First though, what we're going to want to do is kind of set it nicely. So we are going to have to add 2 more cuts, 2 more edge loops around. And I kind of already have this going on, so I'm probably going to keep with a similar idea and make it 4 centimeters down and then 4 centimeters up from here, just to kind of keep it consistently looking on here. So let me remind myself how tall this is. So this is at 86. So that means that we need to move this down so that it is, let's see, 82. So I'm going to write 82 so I don't have to remember that again. How about this bottom one? Where does it need to be? It is at 6. So that one's easy. It needs to be at 10. So I'm going to use my insert edge loop. In fact, I use insert edge loop so much, I have it down here on my custom shelf, so I can click it. I know I need to click one here and somewhere up here. I'm then going to get my move tool by hitting W, and it kind of gets me out of insert edge loop. And I'm looking at my notes. Oh, wow, I was really close. 82. I was off by 0.02. Down here, double click. This one needs to be at 10. Now we have our space to work on these. And what I'm going to do is I am going to actually extrude these inwards just a tad to help me get that kind of edge look, because the way, you know, if this was created with wood, we would have that little tiny gap. So this will be an easy way to help me kind of show off those faces. So let me go to face select. And I'm going to use my select tool. I'm going to click, hold shift, click. Then I'm going to get my extrude tool. So I want to be kind of careful. Remember, my step snap is set to 1 centimeter. That might be a little much, maybe not in this case, but I don't want to forget that this is turned on. If it was a lot larger, like let's say I had a step snap set to 10 centimeters and I did this, like that's obviously going to be too much. So make sure you kind of remember if you do have step snap on. Honestly, 1 centimeter is going to work for me. So I'm going to hold shift, extrude in by 1 centimeter. And now what I need to do is I need to extrude these again to inset a face. So we've kind of done this in other exercises where you would kind of hold shift, go to your scale tool and then hold shift to extrude, but that's not really what we want. Like it's making kind of an ugly mess. So if we need to kind of do an inset and do it very uniformly, it might actually be better to use our actual extrude tool here. So I'm going to click on the extrude tool so that I don't want to mess with this. Whenever I use the extrude tool, I never actually use the gizmo with it because it's really hard to control. If I wanted to do that, I could just have done that by using my scale or move tool. Instead, what I'm looking for is this down here. So the thickness is how much is going in and out. And I don't actually want to extrude it in or out. I'm just trying to inset these faces. So I'm going to change that thickness back to 0. And the one I'm looking for is actually this offset. So that you see how it's kind of insetting, and it's insetting nicely, like an even on all sides. 5 centimeters, a bit too much. I probably want something closer to like a 0.5 centimeter because I'm just making a tiny little gap. You see that? Just a tiny little gap. I don't need much. I'm going to hit Q to confirm to switch out of my my extrude tool. You see that? Now we just need to extrude these outwards. So this one, I'm just going to use my move tool. I do just want to extrude it out that 1 centimeter. So I'm going to hold shift, extrude it out, and there we go. So we have kind of like a nice little gap like that to help us see that these are cabinets. All right. Next, we do want to make maybe just a tiny little crease there. And I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I kind of want to make it look a little bit more showy. I don't really want to make it as hard as this. So rather than that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a way to make it look a little bit more beveled. I do need to put a cut here though, through both of them. I do want it to be exactly in the middle though. So instead of using my insert edge loop, I'm going to go ahead and use my connect. So I'm going to first do one side. Actually, I can do both at the same time. Click and drag, hold shift, click and drag to make sure I get it all the way around. If it's not going all the way around, make sure you didn't turn camera-based selection on at some other point. And I'll just do a connect. I only need one segment though. That's fine. Oops. Did not like that. Sometimes this has happened to me before. What is going on? You see that? It's being fussy. So I guess I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and try to do an insert edge loop. Let's try this. You gonna let me? There we go, yeah. Sometimes this has happened to me before. I'm not quite certain why it does it. I'm sure I could Google it. But did you see how my connect was just not working? Like it looked like it was working, but when I confirm it, it didn't cut all the way through. If that's the case, sometimes then just your insert edge loop might actually work. So unfortunately, I will have to figure out the middle of these and move it, but that's fine. It's not the end of the world. Since I do have my numbers, this should be pretty easy because ultimately these should be probably at where the quarter mark is. Since this is half, this should be probably quarter, maybe not. Let me look at some numbers first. Let's see. This edge is at, let's see, negative 95.5. So I'm going to write that down. This one is at 2.5. So let's do a little math. And there's nothing wrong with using a calculator if you can't do this in your head. 95.5 minus 2.5. So it is 93 units wide, this from one to the other. If we divide that by 2, we get 46.5. So let's add 2.5 back to that, 49. So that means this needs to be at 49. So let's see how close I got. So a little bit off. Negative 46.88. Let's put that at negative 49. Since we're building this evenly, we do know that this needs to also be at 49. So it was unfortunate that the connect tool didn't work, but there are a million different ways to do the same process in this program, and having a good understanding of how all the tools work can be very helpful. So let's do this now. I want to do a bit of an extrude on these faces. I'm going to show this to you and kind of talk about what I'm doing, because I'm going to make like a weird, I'm going to make not a weird, but like a bevelly kind of door to this. So let me select this, and I don't want to use my scale tool. Instead, I am going to use this extrude tool to do this. So watch this. So I don't want them to keep faces together. I actually want them to keep them off. And you can see when we turn it off, it goes in the other, it splits them. Thickness this is a little bit too thick. I'm going to change this to like a 0.5. And I'm going to change the offset to something really small too. Let's try like a 1. You see that? We're getting kind of like a beveled door where it kind of connects very close sort of look. That looks pretty good. I'm satisfied with this. So let's hit Q to keep that, and we'll zoom out. Not too bad, not too bad. The last thing we then need are our little doorknobs. I'm going to make little round ones, and the way that we're going to do this is we are just going to model them separately and then place them on our object. So I usually, for doing something like a doorknob, I should actually save this. Credenza. Even thinking of something like for like an actual door, I would prefer to start with a cylinder over starting with a sphere. Even though sometimes like the knob itself looks very spherical, I like to keep, the part that would actually stick into the door closer to what it should be. So I'm going to make a cylinder. It's going to be really teeny tiny. I might move it out here so I can see it a little bit better in relation to this. I'm going to go to my attribute editor and let's kind of make this closer in shape to what it needs to be. It's actually not too bad. A radius of 1 is probably pretty close for a handle. That means that it's about 2 centimeters in diameter, which it's just a little pull handle. That's pretty close. I'm not too concerned about the height. I'm actually going to do a bunch of extruding to form this. So, 2 centimeters, that's probably pretty good. That's about what might be sticking out. So, this is actually decent. The only thing I do need to change are these subdivision axes. This is a really small object. I don't need 20. I'd probably drop this down to maybe a 12 to save on some polygons. All right. Let's get started then. I do want to move my pivot to that bottom. It's going to help me with positioning it. I also don't need these top and bottom, I don't need these caps. So let me go ahead and delete them. I'm going to just kind of look from the top. I'm going to get my face. I'm going to make sure camera-based selection is off because I do want to delete both of them. And just delete. I can now form the knobby part of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click this ring and I'm going to just use my scale and move tools to do this. So I'm going to first hold shift. Ooh, hold on. That's way too much for me. I don't need a step stamp absolute to 1 centimeter. I'm working pretty small. I'm just going to turn my whole step stamp off. I don't need it at this point. I'm doing some really refined work, so I no longer need that. Okay, move tool. Hold shift, extrude it upwards. I'm going to switch to my scale tool. I'm going to scale this outwards. I'm going to move back to my move tool, hold shift, scale upwards. And I'm going to keep it like that. I'm going to hold shift again, extrude up, get my scale tool, scale it in. And we're pretty close to a round shape and we can kind of fix this. We can make it a little bit nicer in a couple of steps, but this is close enough for us to work with. So I did delete that top face. I didn't really want it coming to a point. I did kind of want to make this a little bit nicer. So let me go to my top view. What I can use if I ever have gaps like this, because this is a great example of what do you do if you have a hole. One thing we could do is we could use the fill hole. So if we have it all selected, we could go to mesh tools and we could do mesh fill hole, and it'll just cap that. But this is not a nice polygon. It has more than 4 sides. We do want to try to keep our polygons to quads, which means 4-sided. If there are certain situations where a triangle makes sense, that's fine. But in general, we do want to keep these to 4s. More than 4 sides is a big no-no because it will make our game engines unhappy. So there are different ways that we could fix this. Another method that we could do is, rather than that, is we could use our bridge tool. So if I select, I built this, with evenly with a division of 4, so I know that this is going to work well. These are across from each other, so I'm going to select this one and then this one. I'm going to hit bridge, and it'll build a polygon between it. I can then select this one and hit bridge. Over here, and bridge. Over here, bridge. We do end up with these tries, and I'm at this stage, I'm not too worried. I'm going to just double click and just fill those holes. I don't really want to waste a bunch of time trying. I guess I could try to scoot things around and make sure that they go to each other. But if you end up with a couple, it's not going to be the end of the world. I do kind of like to also make sure that my handles have like a little bit of a, how is this connected? Usually there's a little bit of maybe like a washer or some kind of like extra little bit. It's not necessarily just this shoved against it. It kind of makes it look a little bit more elegant. So I might go in and insert an edge loop. Select those around and extrude these. Don't think that you have to, oops, just a little. You can add a little bit of elegance by just tweaking these just a tiny little bit. There we go. I did end up with these ugly polygons on the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and delete those. I don't need those. Last thing though, we do have that faceted sort of look because we did a bunch of extrudes. I do want to make sure I'm going to soften these edges. Honestly, I think they all need to be soft. So I'm going to grab my edge select all of them, and just do a quick soften on them. This one's probably shouldn't be soft, so I'm just going to go back and reharden these two. I might reharden this one and this one. There we go. Not too bad. Let's get this in position and see how it looks. So since we did move our pivot to the bottom center, this is going to be very easy to place. That's one of the reasons why it's always good to keep your pivots in nice spots. I need to rotate this 90 degrees. Oops. That's okay. Let's rotate it. There we go. And I can now move it. I'm probably going to turn my step snap back on, since I know that I built the rest of this in 1 centimeter increments, so I can start to place it. So it might have some issues. That's like way too far. So where is this face? .5. Okay. Let me turn absolute off. Position it. And what I might end up doing is I do want to make sure it's kind of sunk in, but this is so small. I might go ahead and, like, once it's kind of pretty close, grab this and kind of really shove it in. There we go. That's good. And that's it. That, we built it. It's a good size. I don't need to scale it. If we did end up putting it here and we're like, oh man, that's too small, there would be nothing wrong at this point to at this step to get your scale tool and just like, oh, that's better, or oh no, it's too big, let's scale it down and make it smaller. Since we do have the pivot point right at the base, it does make it easier to kind of make these adjustments. Even if it's like, oh no, it's not long enough, or not, it needs to be a little bit, oh, actually that looks pretty good. I like that better. Do you see how I kind of squished it? I think that actually looks nicer. I'm going to keep it like that. That was a good change. All right. Once we have the one in place, I kind of want to keep an eye on where that's at. So let's see, we are at x negative 54. Where should this go over here? So this is, ooh, I got off by a little bit. How did I manage that? Should be at negative 49. So negative 49. These all got a little bit wiggled. That's annoying. I didn't move the whole thing, did I? Nope, I didn't. Negative 54. This is negative. The line in the middle is negative 49. So that means it's 5 over. So negative 49. I'm just hitting Control D to duplicate this. This should be at negative 44. Because we do want them to be the same distance apart. The good thing is over here it will be super easy to do that too, because it would just be at 44 and what did I say this one was? 54. Oh, I think I did my math wrong. Hold on. I'm eyeballing this and seeing this wrong. So negative 49, 54. 49. Mm. 44. I guess that is right. It just looks weird to me. I guess it is. It's always good to double check. Okay, we are correct. That's fine. And we have our finished credenza. The last step is going to be to combining this all into one single mesh. So I'm going to first select all my stuff. I'm going to delete its history and freeze its transform, so we're not accidentally merging things weirdly. I'm then going to select the credenza, hold Shift, select them all. I do want to hold Shift and click Combine, so that I can make sure that my pivot position is going to be at the world origin at the end of this. So I'm going to hit Apply. And we get all of this. It's pretty ugly, so what we need to do is hold Shift and select all of them. And we need to delete all the history. Then we can rename this back to credenza. And that's it. Hopefully this is helpful. Going over some tools, big takeaways is the extrude tool. Most of the time it's easier just to use it by holding Shift and using it on the move and rotate. The move and scale. But if we go into the tool itself, it can give us a little bit more finer control if we are, doing our insets, or we're trying to do it in a way where they're not connected. I would caution you against using the extrude tool and then using the gizmo on it. It can be a little bit confusing on how to do that. It might be easier just to use your move and scale if you do want to use a gizmo. But there are instances that you are going to want to go into here. So hopefully you found this useful and you try it out yourself.